MG Hector versus Tata Harrier. Now this is one you have all been looking forward to. So have I, frankly. The MG Hector, it's a newcomer in our market, but this car has garnered so much interest in its short time with us, and rightly so, because it's a really capable vehicle, as we found out in our first drive. And then of course there is the Tata Harrier. It is actually a matter of national pride for a lot of Indians, and again, not hard to see why, because it is quite simply the best Tata car yet. But which one should you put your money on? We'll put them head to head and find out. But before we get right into it, which do you prefer, the MG Hector or the Tata Harrier? Leave a comment below telling us why, and be sure to give this video a like, and in case you haven't already, subscribe to our channel for great automotive content and click the bell icon to turn on your notifications. The MG certainly seems to have made a strong impression, racking up over 28,000 bookings since its launch in early June. The Harrier has also seen steady sales despite the onslaught of SUVs in this segment, and it's done so with just one engine and gearbox, as opposed to the various options available on the Hector. And so it's that powertrain combo, diesel engine, manual gearbox, that we have with both cars today. Say what you will about its VD215 section tires and its long overhangs, you can't deny that the MG Hector is a bold looking vehicle. Okay, some details are a bit over the top, but it makes its own unique statement, and it's a strong one. The high-set chrome-rich nose works really well, giving it an imposing presence, and the kinked window line is a nice touch. Another cool detail is the second set of tail lamps in the lower bumper, which is a safety function that activates when the powered tailgate is opened. It can be opened remotely, incidentally. But then you take a look at the Harrier and it is just as striking. Unlike the Hector, its overall proportions are just spot on, with chunkier tires filling out the big wheel arches nicely. Both cars use 17-inch wheels, but as we've said before, the ordinary design on the Harrier does take away some of the wow factor. What really stands out is the interplay of its big bulging details like the wheel arches, bumpers and grille, with more delicate stuff like the slim LED running lamps and tail lamp cluster. In fact, you might not realize it at first, but the Harrier is actually a little smaller than the MG. Where neither car feels small though is on the inside. The interior of the MG Hector makes for a very good first impression. It all starts with this massive 10.4-inch vertically oriented touchscreen. Now some might not like the all black color scheme of the dashboard, but it makes up for that again with these really nice textures like this fake leather effect, and also nice little brushed aluminium accents. There are a few hard plastics, yes, but then that's the case in the Harrier as well. It's also got these dials that look digital, but they're analog. I wish they were a little bit brighter, and I also wish that there was a bit more storage in the center console. These cup holders are a little bit small. And it does have one major feature advantage in the front seat over the Harrier, and that is a powered driver and passenger seats. The Hector's big draw, of course, is the 10.4-inch touchscreen with a huge array of features. The large screen makes it easy to read, but the one design flaw is that too many basic controls, even the aircon, are assigned to it, with no physical buttons as a redundancy. It doesn't help that it's slow to respond and to load new menus, but then the Harrier system is not great on this front either. It's the contents of that touchscreen system that really give the MG an advantage. And it is a connected car with onboard internet, opening up a wide array of functions like geofencing, remote locking and unlocking via smartphone, over-the-air updates, and even a built-in music streaming app. The Harrier's 8.8-inch touchscreen gets the basics right at least, with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, which are also in the MG of course. It's important to point out that neither of the car's infotainment systems is glitch-free, and both units completely crashed on us for short spurts during this test drive. Both cars get premium sound systems with subwoofers, the Harriers by JBL, the Hectors by Infinity. Both made by the same parent company Harman, incidentally, but we think the Harrier has a slight edge overall. And now here's a quick rundown of both cars' equipment lists, where the MG Hector has a clear advantage. Right from things like the big panoramic sunroof, to stuff like 360-degree cameras, tire pressure monitoring, a powered tailgate, powered front seats and more. The Tata does fight back with its unique driving modes, both for on-road and off-road situations though. But if you look past the equipment list, you'll find that the Harrier has a pretty inviting and practical interior. Now, just like the exterior of the Tata Harrier, I love the way the interior looks. It's just so clean, so neat and so simple. I love the way the dashboard flows horizontally. I even have grown to like this swathe of fake wood that they've put in here. It wasn't so convincing at first, but you get used to it and it looks nice in time. Even the integration of the touchscreen, and I like that it has physical buttons that makes it easy to use on the move. You also get a nice digital instrument cluster that really works quite well along with the analog speedometer. However, there are a few things that I'm not too convinced about. The design of the steering wheel, nothing seriously wrong with it, but it just looks a little bit 1990s. And of course, this handbrake. It may look cool, but in practice, it is fiddly to operate. Still, it's a very practical cabin with a nice cooled bin over here, big cup holders there, big bottle holders down there, and enough little storage spaces to store your knickknacks. There is one huge ergonomic flaw, however, and that's the USB port that really requires you to go digging in order to find it. And despite the fact that the first impressions they make are good, if you dig a bit deeper in both these cars, you'll find some scratchy bits and a general sense that the cabin isn't perfectly put together. Now, this being India, there's a good chance many owners will hand over the reins to a chauffeur, and both the Harrier and Hector seem to have them well covered on this front. Let's start with the MG. Now, like the front seat, the back seat of the MG Hector also makes a very good first impression, and it starts with the amount of space there is. Just look at it. It's also helped by this huge window and low window line that gives you a great view out. And if that isn't enough, there's always the massive panoramic sunroof that lets in a lot of light. You'd also like that the floor is very flat, so a third passenger will have enough room, and you can even recline the backrest to suit your liking. The only downside I can find here is that maybe thigh support could have been a little better on this seat. Now, when it comes to the back seat, it's really close between the Hector and this Harrier. I know I'm not the tallest person, but as you can probably tell, there is more than enough space for just about anyone to stretch out back here too. The seat itself is also very, very comfortable. In fact, I think it might have a slight edge in thigh support, and it's even got pretty big windows. One thing you do miss though is the massive panoramic sunroof that you get in that car. There's no sunroof here. And the fact that that seat can be reclined and this one cannot. Both cars have big boots, although the Harrier's 425 litres is trumped by the Hector's 587 litres. But both will need you to heave your luggage over a large sill and fumble around under the chassis to access the spare tyre. Both are 5-seaters for now, but 7-seat versions will be arriving next year. And with that, let's get to driving, starting with the MG Hector. And what you should know right off the bat is that both these cars use essentially the same 2-litre multi-jet 2 diesel engine from FCA, albeit in different states of tune. Now, considering it's the same engine as in the Tata, it is amazing how different the two feel. First up, the MG version of this engine is a lot quieter. Yeah, there is a little bit of diesel grumble, but it is very well contained in this car. The next thing you notice is that though there is more power available in this car, it's delivered in a far more linear and smoother manner. Rather than coming in one big whomp like it does in the Harrier, here it starts a lot lower down and builds up really gently. There is an advantage to this, of course, and that is that you get more power lower down as soon as you set off from a standstill, and it's spread a lot more evenly. It might have the gentler power delivery, but ultimately the Hector's version of this engine is more powerful, with 170 horsepower compared to the Harrier's 140 horsepower. That reflects in our performance tests, where the MG cracked the 100 kph barrier from a standstill in 11.16 seconds compared to the Harrier's 12.24 seconds. Through the gears, however, the Harrier is marginally quicker from 20 to 80 kph and 40 to 100 kph, which helps in overtaking. Now, where the Hector starts to lose some brownie points is in the dynamics department. The steering is nice and light and very easy to twirl, but I wish it had just a little bit more weight and feel and feedback to give you a little bit more confidence in corners. And it's not just the corners on a twisty road like this. Even on the highway at 3-digit speeds, if you try to make a lane change maneuver, it is a little bit disconcerting. And that light, soft, slightly disconnected feeling extends to the suspension. It's set up very, very softly, and while that means you get a nice, soft, cushy ride at low speeds, the moment you start going even a little bit faster, it becomes too bouncy and moves you around a lot. And again, it's not just out here on a twisty road where that becomes apparent. Out here, yes, you'll feel a lot of body roll in the corners. It's also out on the highway at high speeds where you and your passengers will get moved around a lot in your seats. Overall though, what you'll miss in the Hector is that tough, all-conquering SUV feel. From behind the wheel, what it feels like is a big car. And for some, that should be fine. But if you're out looking for that tough SUV feel, I'm afraid this car won't do it for you. Step into the Tata Harrier straight after the MG Hector, and my gosh, what a difference it is from behind the wheel. It starts with the steering that is just so much quicker and so much more direct. The Harrier is a big car, but it is so much more willing to change direction than the MG. And the best part is they haven't really compromised on the steering weight. In a similar vein to the steering, the Harrier's body control is far better than the Hector's too. So when you do steer it, the car remains much better controlled, it doesn't roll around, and you can actually have quite a lot of fun with this thing. Tata's cars are fast climbing up the rungs of the fun-to-drive mainstream car ladder, and even this big SUV has something to show for it. Now unfortunately, things aren't all very rosy because while the dynamics are really well sorted, other things are not. Take for example the visibility. You get nowhere as nice a view out the front, the sides or the back as you do in the MG. And then there is the elephant in the room, or rather the elephant ears in the room, those massive mirrors. Massive mirrors are fine, but why did they have to place them so high up? What it does is create a huge blind spot. You could hide another Harrier in there. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this is essentially the same 2-litre multi-jet 2 Fiat-sourced engine that does duty in the Hector as well. But the first big difference that you notice is how much noisier it is. At idle, at low revs, at high revs, it makes a much bigger boom and diesel clatter. And you know it's the engine because the rest of the car is quieter than the MG. Whereas in the Hector, you'll get a lot of road noise from underneath the car. In this one, that is much better insulated. It's just the engine. And on the subject of what comes up through the road, this car's ride is also very different from what you get in the MG Hector. Everything feels a lot more solid, a lot more tied down. Okay, there is a little bit of firmness at lower speeds compared to the Hector, but I think it's a forgivable amount. The trade-off is incredible highway stability and poise. Some people may be willing to accept the MG's dynamic compromises, but overall it has to be said the Harrier is the better ride and handling package. Before we wrap up, a quick word on fuel economy. We haven't had the chance to do our full-fledged Autocar test cycle yet, but as per ARAI's official test cycle, the Hector with 17.41 kpl very slightly beats the Harrier's 16.7 kpl. The top spec Hector diesel manual weighs in at 1700 kg, while the Harrier tips the scales at 1675 kg. And when it comes to safety, well, neither car in its Indian spec has been crash tested by NCAP at the time of this test, but with their incredible popularity, it's only a matter of time. For two cars that are so similar on paper, these two couldn't be more different in practice. The Harrier gives you that proper tough SUV feel, it's nice to drive and it rides really well too. It is of course not without its flaws, notably drivetrain refinement and some key omissions on the equipment list. In the city it's more cumbersome to drive and could have been more user-friendly. The Hector has its share of shortcomings too. and doesn't have the solid, rugged feel you expect from a large SUV. The exterior has some glaring panel gaps, and the overall dynamics, especially at high speeds, are poor. You won't be wrong for picking the Harrier, but the fact is the MG scores more where it matters to the Indian SUV buyer. Firstly, it certainly has road presence, though the styling may not be to everyone's tastes. It has an edge over the Harrier when it comes to space and comfort, especially given the fact that the large proportion of owners use their SUVs as chauffeur-driven urban transport. It has the better engine as well, with more power and better refinement. Throw in the feel-good features, from the massive sunroof and connected touchscreen to smaller stuff like ambient lighting to even something as simple as the reclining back seat, and the Hector noses ahead of the Harrier, offering more bang for the buck along the way.